Sidney Pollack's 16 films have received 43 Oscar nominations. 4 have been nominated for Best Picture. He paired Robert Redford and Barbra Streisand in The Way We Were, Paul Newman with Sally Field in Absence of Malice, and Dustin Hoffman and Jessica Lange for Tootsie. In 1985, Redford again starred for Pollack, this time opposite Meryl Streep in Out of Africa. This summer, Pollack opens The Firm, based on John Grisham's best-selling novel, and starring Tom Cruise, Gene Hackman, and Holly Hunter, and we're very pleased to have him here. Welcome.
Good to be here.
How you feel about the film?
Well, you're always a little bit nervous before a film opens. I feel good about it, but I'll feel a lot better about it after next week when we get it open.
Get it around. Tell me why you did this, because it is not easy to take a best-selling novel and translate it into a movie, because a lot of people have read it and everybody has a sense of what the book was.
Yeah, that's always a problem, but in this particular case, I did it because I thought it was just a terrific story, number one, and I also thought it was you know, a thriller that didn't require a lot of pyrotechnics. It was made out of people. I feel more comfortable with actors and trying to work with performances, and thought this had an opportunity for a lot of wonderful characters in a kind of contemporary story. And
is it possible that Holly Hunter is going to walk away with this film? It is a magnificent, don't you think so?
Well, she's wonderful in it, absolutely. She's terrific in it. I mean, I never know what people mean when they say walk away with the film.
Well, I mean, just get attention beyond the size of the role.
Well, I think, I think she deserves attention beyond the size of the role, absolutely. I think there are several performances in the picture like that. You know, I had a great, well, I think Gary Busey's got two short scenes, and, you know, normally you wouldn't expect somebody with 2 short scenes to get that much attention. I think David Strathairn, who plays the brother is in prison. An extraordinary presence in it.
He does.
And, I mean, I could say that about everybody, really. Yeah. But, yes, absolutely. I mean, the players are all wonderful in it. They really are.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about making a film from a bestseller. I mean, you've done other adaptations of best-selling books.
Well, I think this is the first really. I think this is the first bestseller I've ever done. I've done like old, that's right. You know, where a book is older. A long time ago, they shoot horses, don't they? Which was a book from the 30s or something like that. But when you take a bestseller, you're always a little bit intimidated by. I always have this recurring nightmare that all the people sit in the audience and turn around and say, "That's the guy," throw stones at him if you change it. We worried a lot about trying to deliver to the audience that read this book, and they were legion, essentially what the book had, but still have to make the changes that you have to make a picture work.
What changes do you have to make a picture work? I mean, what are the kinds of
Well, sometimes they're hard to explain in all cases.
Too many characters. You got to.
Sometimes you have to compress it. Look, it's a long film as it is, but some say too long.
Yeah.
But it would have been really endless if I had tried to do the whole book. Sure. So number one, we had
been a television miniseries.
We had to compress it. Number two, there are things that read great. You have a wonderful time reading about Xeroxing in the book, but I would have really put you to sleep if I had spent all that time, you know, showing the Xeroxing. The other thing is that you just, sometimes in order to shorten something, you make one small change. And in the case of a thriller like this, where everything is so radically interlocked, it may force you to change 10 things.
We got to do this for the benefit of the audience. We can't assume that everybody's read The Firm and nobody's seen this movie. This is the story of a young man who graduated from Harvard Law School, played by Tom Cruise. He goes down to a firm in Memphis, and he joins this firm. His wife is reluctant to do it. She's a school teacher. They join this firm. It turns out that the firm is, you can say, it's corrupt and involved with organized crime, and he discovers that, and then the chase is about what does he do when he discovers that, and that becomes the story. The one thing was that you went through 4 writers, and very good writers.
Well,
Why is it so hard to get a script?
Well, first of all, I didn't go through 4 writers. The team that I hired did the movie that I did. What happened was I wasn't, I'm sure I wasn't the first director on this project, but Paramount bought this before it was a bestseller and before
Grisham was a household name.
Before it was even published, you know. And at that time, David Rabe, a very, very good writer, did a screenplay. That was before I had anything to do with it. It wasn't a screenplay that they wanted to do. It was a very good screenplay. They hired another writer named Dan Pine. He did another screenplay. I came along and got on it and went back, read the book, and wanted to start from scratch again, and hired Robert Towne and David Rayfield together as a team.
Who you'd worked with before.
Exactly, both of them.
Right.
And that was the script that we did. But I never met the other two writers or worked with the other two writers. I just worked with Towne and Rayfield.
Take a look at this clip. This is Tom Cruise and Gene Hackman, who plays a partner in the firm, talking about why they're lawyers at lunch. Let me go now to the question of some people who've seen the movie, as I have. You take a long time to get him to Memphis, to get him recognizing what the problems are down here. Mm-hmm. Why was that? Why did you do that?
Because I felt that there was a certain amount of believability that was required to make this work. When you read this book, you take care of any kind of suspension of disbelief for yourself because you're alone and reading it and imagining it. I was afraid that if I started out and told you how bad this firm was, the way the book does on page 1, mm-hmm. that you would never be hooked into it. And that what I had to do really
Why would his character come work for him if he was number one in his class at Harvard or whatever?
I wanted to just sort of set up this perfect American dream situation and see if I couldn't hook you in with it and then gradually peel it away and show you how rotten it was inside. And the film is kind of set up so that all the pieces get sort of put into position rather slowly and carefully, and then it accelerates. I mean, I think the last 40 minutes of it are really where all of the action happens.
This may be silly, but how important do you view your function of selecting the actors? I mean, was Tom Cruise the only perfect choice for this film?
Well, I think selecting the actors is, if you're doing films which are performance films, which are mostly what I do, and they're as much character-driven as they are narrative or story-driven. They're certainly not special effects films. They really depend heavily on the actors and their performance. It's hugely important. I've done an awful lot of my job by picking the right actors. In the case of Cruise, I didn't pick Cruise, although I would have had I had the opportunity.
Paramount did.
Paramount had sent Cruise, he wasn't signed on yet, but he was definitely interested in it, and subject to a director and a script, he wanted to do it.
So what happens when a guy with your reputation, I mean, the way we were in Out of Africa and Tootsie and The Firm and all those movies you've done, they shoot horses, don't they? Well, no, the Electric Horseman or...
Yeah, they were both. I did both.
Both. Okay. I thought I'm making a stupid mistake.
No. They Shoot Horses was an old one, and then...
We're going to talk about Redford in a minute. Now, what do you want to know about Tom Cruise when you come on a set to direct him?
Just really what makes his imagination come to life, and how to get certain qualities that you don't get by explaining precisely what you want. Being a director is a little bit like being a good doctor, where sometimes somebody comes in and their arm hurts, and you know that it's coming from a pinched nerve in their neck, let's say. And you have to be intelligent enough to know that it's never literal. So sometimes you have to go in a very circuitous way to get what you want from an actor, because you can't do it by necessarily describing in result terms what you want. So in order to do that, you have to get to know the actor a little bit, or at least know how their imagination works, what buttons to push, if you will.
And that makes you almost a psychologist, doesn't it?
It does make you a psychologist, but it certainly makes you preoccupied.
A student of human nature.
Yeah, preoccupied with the same things. You know, actors are doing a very, very difficult thing, because they're trying consciously to create something that doesn't work consciously. I mean, emotion is a product of the unconscious. Otherwise, there would be no field of psychology.
Otherwise, it would be easy and everybody could do it.
That's right. And so you're trying to consciously produce something which works best when it's unconscious, when it's left alone. And so it's a very delicate thing that actors are doing, and an awful lot of it has to do with a degree of their comfort. Just as simple a thing as them being emotionally relaxed and comfortable sometimes is all that's required. When you hire very, very good actors, you don't have to do a lot except stay out of their way and create an atmosphere where they can do the work. I mean, on this picture, I didn't do a lot of creating things for actors.
You didn't have to talk about motivation
No, not when you have actors of this caliber, Ed Harris and Holly Hunter and these guys, all of these people. You just don't do that. And Gene Hackman, what you're trying to do really is not get in their way and create some sort of an atmosphere where they're relaxed.
Is there a special sort of, I mean, you never worked with Hackman before either, had you? You know, so here's a guy who's a recent Oscar winner, an extraordinary career. Do you look forward to that? I mean, just to say, boy, I like being on the same court with a guy like this.
I mean, he's a guy I wanted to work with for a long, long time. I've admired his work ever since Lilith, first picture that I remember seeing him in 100 years ago. And he's never not interesting on film. Exactly. I mean, he's got a kind of terrific danger to him. And I think he's quite romantic in this film.
And there's almost something almost beneath it all there's a kind of, he knows he's corrupt, and so therefore there's an honesty about him.
Exactly. There's a terrific sadness.
That's exactly, the sadness about being corrupt.
It moved me a lot. I thought he was wonderful.
There is a story that you wanted to make that character, or one of the characters, a woman, and specifically Meryl Streep, so that you could develop a little, what?
Well, that got kind of exaggerated. What happened was I get bored without love stories. I just really get bored in movies.
Let's have them.
I get bored if I have to work for a whole year on a movie where there's no love story. And I took a look at this thing and I said, well, what am I going to do about a love story here? I'm going to really go crazy if I don't figure out some way to make a love story. So I thought, both in the interest of the love story and in the interest of making it really contemporary, it seemed wrong to have a law firm with no female lawyers. And I thought, well,
there was one, but she was dead.
There was one, but she was dead, that's right. Affirmative action on stilts, as they say. And I thought, well, let's take one of the lawyers and make her a woman. It could really be more correct and more an accurate picture of the 90s.
That's the reality of law firms today.
Make her mean as hell, evil as hell.
And make her seduce Tom Cruise.
Exactly. And say, okay, let's make this not a metaphorical seduction, but a real seduction. Since he's supposed to be seduced by somebody who represents the firm, for blackmail purposes anyway, why not make it literal? Now, we never got as far as talking about Meryl Streep. We never got as far as writing it. We never got as far as any of that. We just talked about it for a while, and people got up in arms that we were going to change.
And you backed off because it was Grisham and all that?
Well, we finally just thought we're better off to stay with the concept that one of the elements of this piece is that this law firm has no women.
Let me talk about Robert Redford, a man I admire enormously. You've worked with him on 7 or 8 films.
I think 7.
What's the relationship?
8. Well, he's just, he's sort of, we sort of grew up and got older together in films together. I met him when I was an actor in the first movie he ever did as an actor that nobody's ever seen. It was an old movie called War Hunt.
Right,
exactly, 1960. And he was, to me, a throwback to the actors that I was nuts about when I was growing up and going to movies. Real classical, traditional, old-fashioned movie stars who were very, very redolent of some kind of American essence, if you will. They were very much a part of the American landscape. And they were heroic in a kind of understated way. And I got really fascinated with, I mean, in some way it feels to me now as though all of the characters that he and I have done together are the same character. He's just gotten older and older and older and older and gone to different places. I mean, sometimes he's out west, sometimes he's in Africa, sometimes he's in New York.
Sometimes he's in Cuba.
Exactly. But he's the same character. He's the...
And what's the definition of that character?
Well, I think he's, number one, a man who doesn't want to give up any of himself in order to have a relationship, which costs him severely, and so he's always alone, ultimately. And he's somebody who doesn't want to live in a society where he has to subjugate his own individual needs for the purposes of some collective authority. So he's usually on the edge of an uncivilized area or territory. It's why he's a mountain man and gives up a city. It's why he's in Africa, you know, on the edge of that area. The two things are related, I think. I mean, a guy who believes it's possible to have relationships but doesn't really understand what he has to personally give up and doesn't want to, it's an individualist in the sort of real, generic, basic sense of the word, who's willing to pay the price for his individualism, but it's a costly price. And usually in all of those pictures, he has encounters with very strong women who are better people than he.
Better people in what way?
Well, they're wiser.
Right.
They know more. And he can't quite learn the lesson and ends up alone. And that's been the case in every one of the films that I've done with him. I don't know why. I didn't decide that. And I only can say that I'm fairly certain that that's true now from the vantage point of having done it for 28 years.
But is there also some special nature of the relationship between the two of you, a trust or sort of, or is it just so happened you guys have worked together, it's worked well, no problems, and you know, we'll do it again?
I think that there has to be, if you work that much with one person, a kind of trust that develops. I mean, you know their weaknesses, you know their strengths, you know what you do with them, and you're comfortable. There's a kind of shorthand. It's why there are repertory companies. It's why people often work with the same group of people. It's a lovely thing not to have to get to know somebody all over again.
The whole thing we were talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, is it possible that the two of you will be working on bridges of Madison County?
Anything's possible.
Likely.
I don't know that it's likely. I don't know that I'll ever do Bridges of Madison County. All I know is somebody sent it to me. I read it. I thought that it was, again, a very difficult adaptation, but there was something very moving in it.
Difficult adaptation because?
Because it's very small. There is really just an encounter, and because what's most moving about the book happens after the encounter.
It's over.
It's over. They don't ever see each other again, and what touches you about the book ultimately, I mean, I think it's a very manipulative book. I mean, you know, but it works. But what touches you about it so much is the way in which they both remain dedicated to this idea of the relationship and what happens as she learns of what happens later in his life. Now, that's hard to do in a movie. What you'll see in a film is what happens with the two of them together. So I can't say that I'm going to do the film. I could only say I'm thinking about it.
Steven Spielberg owns the rights to it.
That's right.
He bought the rights. Amblin Productions, and they've sent you a copy. And there's been some talk that they think that...
Well, everybody's name has come up. Redford certainly, and certainly because of me, Redford.
Yeah. Can you think of anybody who'd be better?
No, it's not a question of better or worse. I think there are many people who could play it. I don't know that anybody's better than Bob or any of those things. I mean, certainly he's the right age and certainly a symbol of all that romanticism. His whole career has been that. Hard part is the woman.
Who can you imagine?
I don't want to get into casting it on television.
Let me talk about acting a little bit too. But you wanted to be an actor.
At one time, 100 years ago, yeah.
Well, okay, and you decided, did you decide not to?
No, I kind of got, somebody sort of suggested that I become a director, and I thought they were insulting me and saying
that you're not a good actor.
You're not going to be a good actor. Actually, it was Burt Lancaster. I was a dialogue coach on a film in 1960 that John Frankenheimer directed called The Young Savages. It had a bunch of new young actors on it, and I got hired by Frankenheimer to coach the kids, and Lancaster kind of began to push me toward directing, and so did Frankenheimer, and I thought, okay, I'm never going to make it much as an actor. The irony, of course, is now that I don't give a damn about acting.
Now everybody wants you to act.
Well, not everybody, but I get these calls.
The first Tootsie was the first time I ever saw you.
But that was Dustin. That was Dustin Hoffman insisting to the point where I thought we were going to come to blows, and that wasn't the only thing. You know, our feuds were famous on that picture, but he insisted that I play that part, and I said, Dustin, I don't want to do this. I haven't acted, and I hadn't in 25 years. I'm not going to stop and put on makeup and put on a costume in the middle of directing a big, expensive, complicated movie like this. It's tough enough. He began to send me flowers, saying, please be my agent. Love, Dorothy. Yeah, he would sign it, Dorothy.
Yeah.
And what he said was, look, in Some Like It Hot, there are machine guns that make these guys put dresses on. The only thing I've got to make me put a dress on is that my agent says to me, you're never going to work again. If a fellow actor says to me, you're never going to work again, I'm not going to put the dress on. If you say to me, you're never going to work again, maybe I'll go put the dress on. Now, I thought this is method acting carried to its nth degree, but Dustin does believe, and in that sense I have to agree with him, that it's hard enough to do the make-believe. What's there to use easily and freely that's reality, use it. So he made a big case for this and finally got to a point where I said, okay.
You glad you did it?
I'll do it. Now I'm glad I did it. At the time I hated doing it. I truly did. I hated it, and I couldn't concentrate on it, and I was much too used to thinking about what the actor was doing, so that the only time I could work well was in my own close-ups, where I didn't have to look at him, because every time there was a two-shot, I was trying to act, but really what I was doing was watching him to make notes in my because you develop habits after all those years. So I didn't much like it. But then when I went to the movie and saw everybody laughing,
Husband and Wives.
Husbands and Wives was I just was an enormous fan of Woody Allen's.
And he called you up and said, "How about?"
Well, he didn't call. He had his casting person call and he sent me a script and wrote me a very nice letter. And I read the script, and I was crazy about the script. I mean, I wasn't crazy about this jerk that I played, but I was crazy about the script, and I was an enormous fan of Woody Allen's, and I thought it was a smart, wonderful script.
What does he do best?
Observes life like all great artists do. What he does best is he sees connections that other people don't see, that he sees beyond the surface of life to the patterns and meanings, and he makes connections in those patterns and meanings, and he does it through humor often, but it's painful because it's funny because it's so true. And I think Husbands and Wives is one of the most well-observed and truest and smartest pieces of work that he's done. And Judy Davis was
who plays your wife in
great and she's so terrific in that movie. I just, he has obviously has a capacity for casting. Now, I hate to admit that because he cast me in this creepy, jerky role, and I thought, my God, is that what he thinks I am?
But did that and these other acting things give you sort of an additional interest in acting? I mean, are you a little bit now saying, you're like a little bit like John Huston. You can always find.
Well, no, I like to kid about it that now that Redford is becoming a director, I'm going to become a great aging actor or something like that. But no, to tell you the truth, it's not something I really pursue or care a lot about. I do it when something comes along like Husbands and Wives that I'm really crazy about, a part that I'm really crazy about.
Do you see a lot of films you want to direct, or do you really sort of just sit back and wait and say, if I don't really want to do this badly, I'm not going to do it?
Well, no. When you say, do I see a lot of films, do you mean, am I a movie goer?
No. Do you see films No, I'm sorry. Are you presented with a lot of things you want to direct? Or is it rare that somebody comes to you with something?
It's very rare. It's the toughest thing in the world in this business is the amount of damage you do to your brain reading junk. Because you just spend every minute of your free time reading, trying to find something to do, and so much of it is awfully bad that you really feel you're going to do yourself some serious damage.
I hate that about the business. It is looking for something that's right for you, that's quality.
You think that, I always say to myself, I have to get up every morning for the next year of my life with these characters. Do I really care enough to live with whoever these 2 people or 3 people or 5 people are, that every morning for the next year of my life, the first thing that's going to happen when I open my eyes is I'm going to worry about what they're doing. And I'm going to do it at night, and then after I finish shooting it, I'm going to look at them with the film and cut it, and it's going to be a year. And it's hard to find something that's worth doing that for.
The film by Sidney Pollack that he's the director of is The Firm. Great to have you.
It's good to be here. Thanks,
Really
Tony.
is. Thank you. We'll be right back. Stay with us.